Director Murphy, acknowledged. Thank you. Very good. It's passed unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Kraman. For the extension, 5-year extension, San Joaquin Hills.
Mr. Chair, may I make a point of clarification?
Yes, please.
Mr. Kraman's current contract expires on October 8, 2019. So a 5-year extension would take it to October of 2024.
Not 2023.
Not 2023. So I want to make sure we have that clear on the record.
Well
I
taken.
was moving the extension from this date, not
from now. Got it. From April of or May of 2018.
Right. So essentially, it'd be a 4-year extension of his current contract.
Thank you very much for the clarification. As a person who's going to write this up, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dates, I understand, are very important to attorneys.
We
Mr.
have a
Chair.
friendly motion for amendment.
Can we go ahead and just make it June 30 of 2023 so that it ends at the same time as a typical fiscal year or pay adjustment? Does that make sense?
Mr. Kraman, any
That,
comments?
that would be acceptable to me.
Is that a friendly amendment?
take it as a
Substitute
friendly
motion.
Substitute motion? I'd second that. I'll second.
It was seconded by Director Hab. All right, all in favor say aye. Discussion? Any other discussions on this?
So,
Director Maryott.
thank you. So we're so the vote is to extend to 2023. We modified the month, right, to June.
Correct.
And if we didn't extend, then it would just still be in discussion, and Mike would be contractually guaranteed until about this time next year. No, later, about 18 months. No more complicated than that, correct? Right? General round?
Yes.
Thank you. So I intend to vote against this, and it pains me a bit. I like Mike a great deal, and I think he's excellent at several components of his position. But we're not, since I've been on the board, I don't see total success. I see a certain amount of chaos. We're in the news a lot. We're in court a lot. And that's a lack of execution. And I don't think this is a time to be extending Chairman Kraman for several years. He's had a tall order. I mean, he's had a lot of challenge, and it's a very, very complicated thing to try to get the 241 extended through. And I saw that immediately. But at the end of the day, we're a results-oriented organization. We have an obligation to the bondholders. And I don't think I can extend Mike at this time for several more years. It just seems inconsistent with what we've been dealing with and how it's been handled in a cumulative way. Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Piotr.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Joseph, but Mr. Kraman still serves at the pleasure of the board, and we can terminate him under the conditions of the contract, and there's a severance package if there's no cause.
That's correct.
So even though we extend his contract, he still serves at the pleasure of the board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question for Mr. Joseph. The discretion of the board, the majority of the board would be potential termination within 30 days or 60 days for the record and for the public. You can refresh my memories.
I'd have to look at the contract. I don't recall what the time period is, but it certainly is at the discretion of the board.
Well taken. Thank you.
I have that in front of me here. We do not have to provide any notice of termination. We just notify, and he has a 6-month severance.
Within 24 hours.
Within 24 hours.
It's a 90-day severance, because Amendment 2 changed it from 6 months to 90 days.
That's correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Director Ward.
I would share the concern that Director Maryott expressed. Certainly, it's very difficult to try to extend a toll road through an area where no one wants it. It's always been very difficult to get it into South County. The 241 has been was killed by a vote in 2008. And then this agency since 2008 has been on multiple campaigns to try to create enough interest to get this going again. Our current one being the South County Mobility Project. San Clemente has made no bones about being upset about how this South County Mobility Project has been handled, how the process has been handled. So I just want to make that point that I wouldn't be supporting it either. I think we need to see how this goes, and if this agency starts to turn around and do the things that we're supposed to be doing, and planning for the things that we are supposed to be planning for, then I would support going forward. But I have the same concerns, and also, this evaluation was a pitiful effort on the board's part to participate in. So, we seem to have a breakdown of evaluating our executive director.
Chair Sachs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would remind the board members here that it was Mr. Kraman that worked to drive us through the environmental agreement that was a landmark agreement to start to understand any potentiality and possibility to move forward on a connection of the 241, and bringing those disparate groups of environmentalists together is an accomplishment that I don't believe many, if any, of us could have managed. With regard to the bondholders and their responsibility, the rating of this agency has been increased. The bonds were reissued and sold out almost immediately. Were there any concerns with bondholders? That would have been raised at the time of the resale and reissuance of these bonds. With the understanding that it was 2 years ago during an evaluation that some additional guidance was requested of the then board for Mr. Kraman, who he has engaged in wholeheartedly and fully. And if you look at his demeanor and operational style through the past 2 years, there's been a marked improvement and engagement. Director Spitzer used to always joke about the CEO being an engineer. My father, rest in peace, was an engineer. I had no negotiating power whatsoever with my father. Even after I became emancipated, I had to do everything in a linear requirement to help him understand why I should be able to have the car keys for my date next Thursday. I used to get dates. I remember both of them vividly. So I would just ask the board to reference all the milestones that have taken place, and the milestones that have been accomplished both through the leadership of Mr. Kraman and the unanimous, in most cases, consent of the board of directors. So I would like to ask that you consider those things when casting your vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Schwartz?
Yes, I'll also be opposing this. I think, first of all, not all of us are totally pleased with the settlement with the environmental groups. The city of San Clemente would have loved to have been made aware of it before it was finalized and settled, instead of reading it in the paper the next day. So some of those things weren't handled to the best of what we see. And I think right now, I don't know why we're doing it right now. I think the optics with all the things that are coming to the board, where we're getting lots of play on talk radio and newspapers and everything else, and the public, why now we choose to do this. So we have a year to work through some very difficult issues, and I'd be welcome to look at it when we get through some of these issues, to talk about it way before it expires. But I just don't think now is the right time. It's real poor time.
Thank you. Director Wong?
I want to put in my my 2 cents worth in terms of being here for the past year. And I think Mr. Kraman will remember right off the bat, the first month I was here, I went up to him and offered my very constructive criticism. And I thought he took it so well. I was very surprised and pleased, and observing him for the past year. He really took it to heart, and I think that is remarkable for someone who could very well have shut his door on me and say, well, you're a new director, and wait around and see. But instead, he took it really well, and I wanted to say that because I hear a lot of concerns here, but our CEO works. His direction is from us. So any of the chatters here about some of the directions he took, that's on all of us. I agree with Director Ward that the board's lack of participation in the survey is problematic. And I think but that should not be held against him, because that's our fault. And I will be the first one to admit I didn't fill one out. I found it in my junk mail box. So it's my fault for not looking at that folder. I didn't realize it until it was brought up, why it wasn't filled out. Went and looked and searched all my emails and finally found it there. So, and I definitely will do better on that. But I think it is very difficult to lead an agency through these tough times. I have found Mr. Kraman, when I had my conversations with him, have been very objective, providing all points of views and information that I need to make my decision. And I think that's remarkable. And I kind of take to heart of anybody saying that he is biased in any ways, or any suggestions, because has not been true in my dealing with him. And when I pushed back and questioned data, information, I was provided objective information and data. And lastly, as to the settlement issues, well, I understand your concern, Director Schwartz, but these issues were brought in during closed session. If San Clemente wasn't there, then we need to look at how we can better communicate with San Clemente on those issues. But to hold it against the CEO, and then I don't think that would be proper. So that's my concern.
Thank you, Director Huang. Director Mueller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a lot to add to the last two directors. Director Sachs hit it right on the head. I've been here 2 years, and I've seen a marked change in Mr. Kraman and how he deals with people. And me personally, when I first came in, I had some of the same conversations. I was concerned about things. And I used to deal with a lot of engineers, so I kind of took with a grain of salt. That's how engineers talk to people sometimes. But, I've watched his demeanor change. He seems to listen more. And for lack of a better word, he's grown as a CEO. And he's a much better leader. In terms of the debt service, Chair Sachs hit that right on the head. We've sold out our bonds immediately. Our ratings keep going up. I don't think that our bondholders are unhappy with the performance that they're receiving.
Probably because you don't disclose
I would just like to
lawsuits
go out
that
and
you're
say,
legally required
again,
to.
I've only been here 2 years. I got here right as the settlement was being agreed to or negotiated. I didn't vote on it. I was out of town. So, that's a board decision to do that. That's not Mr. Kraman creating this agreement on his own. The board came together and agreed on that. So, try to hold that against him, I think, is inappropriate. But I think I'm going to support this motion to extend it, because I have seen the leadership in Mr. Kraman. It's exactly what this board needs. He's very thoughtful. We do listen to other people. He listens to us as directors, and I think that's important for our leaders. So thanks.
Thank you, Director Mueller. Director Shea?
Yes, and I'll just hopefully be short. Number one, as I've said, I'm very proud of Mike and his effort. Especially, too, I didn't add the fact that you've really brought together a stellar staff that works for us, that are very on top of every issue that comes up. They're very communicative. They've just been wonderful to work with. But I do agree with some of the comments that were made in regard to the fact that Mike Kraman works for us. We direct him. We vote on these issues that are very difficult, and I know it's created some splits between us, and which is sad because we all know in our own communities how these issues can really create so many factions and split relationships, which is very difficult. But we as a board have directed Mike Kraman to move forward on 241 and all the other things that he's directed to do, and he fulfills that obligation very well. So I think that if there is an issue, it really isn't with Mike Kraman unless we personally see some problems with him, and then of course we should address it. We've asked everyone to submit comments to us, and almost we had 2 or 3 comments. I was that no one, commented in closed session, except I think Mrs. Ward did, which is fair. But I think that just to be fair, honestly, what we're doing is just continuing a great relationship with someone that implements our policy. And if anyone's upset with the policy, it's really incumbent upon all of us to have maybe a different position, a different vote, a different perspective. But it's really, we're the ones that are making these decisions. He's just implementing them. So with that, I won't say much more, but I'm just very pleased with our staff. Love working with all of you. And Mike, it's really been a much improvement over the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shea. Director Maryott? Go ahead then.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, wait a minute.
You could go first and then.
Okay. I tried to cede you the floor, and I was overruled
Thank you,
by
Brian.
the
I
chair.
appreciate it.
So very briefly, there is much I don't know. There isn't much that I didn't witness in terms of the legal settlement and what that required and so forth. And then I was in the meeting where I thought we were reviewing Mike. We were a little bit dysfunctional. We were unable to do the closed session review at that time. And then I was unable to be at the follow-up meeting where he was formally reviewed. I want to be very clear. I like Mike a lot, and I think he's very good at a lot of the job. But and I appreciate the clarification, but I'm familiar with it. I know that we can obviously terminate somebody at any time, but this is an endorsement, and that's very, very different. That when you lay out a new 5-year term, that's a very, very strong endorsement 18 months out. So to me, there's a big difference between very good and great. And since I've been on the board for 18 months, we've had communities that cannot sleep at night, including mine. We have had a tremendous amount of anxiety. We have maps still on the route. We have routes still up there. There's a young lady here today. There's no way the Beltway is getting done. We all know that, but her and her family don't know that. So 18 months now I've been watching this, and there are times when you need great. Now, Mike may still be great, okay? I've heard a lot of conversation that indicates to me that he's coachable, that he's come a long way in areas where perhaps he was previously more challenged. By the way, Mike, I always thought you were a school teacher. I didn't know you were an engineer. So to be clear, I think Mike could still be great, but it's going to take great to get what might be this real meaningful regional relief and some path figured out and so forth, and everybody feeling more collaborative on board, including the communities involved. That may take great, not very good. And what we would be endorsing right now for another 5 years at the end of 18 months in a very, very challenging time for the agency is very good. And I can't vote for that.
Thank you. Director Crane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very interesting comments from everybody. I've been an alternate for the last year and a half, and I'm delighted I'm here today to vote on this, which I will be supporting the extension. And I think that this gives Mike a level of, I can be here, I can do my thing, I'm improving every day. And for us, those of us who were here prior to Mike's arriving, remember how this agency was in complete flux. We had a CEO who was really not on the job very much and did a lot of things so he was let go. Mike came in as an engineer, and he was here as an acting CEO, and then he was promoted, got rid of the acting, and became the CEO. I haven't been to that many meetings, but the meetings that I have attended in the last year and a half, I've seen a marked improvement in Mike. And I don't think that we're just saying, okay, 5 years, it'll go out to the press, obviously. And And I think that is a level of confidence that we have in him. And I do have a level of confidence in Mike. I think he's been a great leader. For me, he's very easy to speak with. And I don't get along with engineers because I don't understand them. But he's been great. He's very attentive. And so maybe he taught engineering. But I will be supporting this. And again, remember, he did not have an evaluation last year. So we're kind of doing catch up. And if he had had an evaluation last year, perhaps this conversation will go on a different level. And I was here and I voted for the settlement. It was a labor of love. It was very, very difficult to bring all those parties together. And Mike and his staff did it. And they did it with a great deal of confidence and a great deal of respect for all sides. So with that, one hurdle is completely finished. So, Mike, I think you're doing a great job, and I will be happy to approve the extension.
Thank you, Director Crane. Director Puckett and then Director Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been here over 5 years. I went through the term of the previous CEO, which I felt was a disaster. My hero here, Mr. Sachs, I thought said it very well. And if I could have just stood up at that time and said ditto, I would have said double ditto. I think you said it right. Mike, I think you came in at a tough time. You've done a great job, and I'm very, very supportive of your leadership. So I'll be supporting this proposal.
Thank you, Director Puckett. Director Warren.
I wanted to make a comment about the settlement agreement. For those of you that weren't here and are new, that agreement was done without notice to the City of San Juan Capistrano or the City of San Clemente. We were not briefed on it. Not only were we not briefed on that settlement agreement, those cases never came up in the 2 years that I was on the board in closed session. So when everyone says it was a labor of love and how great it was, I'd like to know when that was discussed and who was on that. The big thing about the settlement, it was Mike Kraman and some of the board's decision, maybe the executive board, to follow this settlement, and it would be a great springboard to start trying to do other alignments, including trying to take over Los Patrones Parkway, which is being built as a free arterial. And I would ask all of you, how's that process going so far?
We're talking about...
No, I know,
with all due
but they're all
respect, my
saying,
good
as
friend.
far as, let's not blame it on Mike. I believe it was Mike Kraman's direction. As a director, this is how we can go forward. Maybe all of you are happy with that, but some of us and some of our residents are not happy with going forward on the process. So that's the last thing that I would say. And it's hard when I hear from new people that say, you know, everything's great, the settlement was great. The process so far is not good.
Thank you, Director Ward. Any other comments?
I'd call
Director
for the
Murphy?
no. I'd just call for the question, Mr. Chair. That means
I want to make some final comments before the motion. I'm a new guy here. I joined the TCA because my colleague, Councilwoman Lori Davies, replaced the position, and she asked me to be a part of this dynamic organization. So as a newcomer, I've enjoyed working, dealing, talking to CEO Mike Kraman. He brings a lot of knowledge, he brings a lot of information to the table, and I have seen, quite frankly, a lot of improvements in my personal interaction with him. I happen to be an engineer, and I happen to be a transportation engineer, and that's what I've been doing for 35 years between New York and Hawaii in my past life. And I've dealt with a lot of huge organizations and going to courts a lot as an expert witness. And I bring all of that in my decision-making process. And let me clarify a couple of items to recap all these discussions, and we want to make a final vote and move forward. I'm one person, one vote. The same goes with everyone, Director Ward and Director Maryott and Director Schwartz. Everyone that happened to be in the committee had the opportunity to chime in, to comment in any shape or form. From my perspective, speaking for one voter, one decision maker, in my judgment, it was fair. I would have hoped that everyone in the committee would have participated all along. There are some committee meetings that some of my colleagues don't show up. As you know, we cannot force anyone to show up. You have other obligations, you have other responsibilities. So with all that said, in my judgment, the evaluation process was fair and it was equitable. And at the end, everyone scored Mike Kraman's performance in different categories. Yes, there were some categories that even I was not happy, but it was only specifically to respond to you, my good friend Director Ward, that I did not give a high score. It was a low score that I for one gave, but I cannot disclose it. I don't want to get into those personal individual details and feedback. So yes, I gave a low score, but in other categories, for someone who's running this dynamic organization, yes, we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of issues ahead of us. Growth is inevitable. I know because of the population growth in this county and everything else. This agency, this organization, and all of us who represent, the great people of 22 cities and unincorporated areas of Orange County, we have moral, ethical, and legal obligations to watch everything so that when we cast our votes in any shape or form, we serve our communities. So with all that said, in my judgment, to recap, he's done a very good job. The settlement agreement with the environmental, that's a different thing. It happened honestly before my time that I joined this great organization that I've enjoyed working with all of you. So that's a separate thing, and I'm sorry, it's past. In my view, as a newcomer here, it's past. We are moving forward. We want to think about what we can do to make this county greater and how Orange County can be one of a vibrant county by providing transportation, infrastructure improvements in any shape or form, as long as the JPA would allow us to do that legally speaking.
It doesn't.
So with
So
all
stop.
that said, quite frankly, that's my final take, that, I've been very pleased, and hey, we need to move forward. If there are no other comments, then I would like to entertain motions. So, any other questions, Director Murphy?
No, I'm just trying to call for the question again.
All right. It's not debatable.
Hopefully not. Except by the chair.
Okay, who's abstaining and who's opposing? No, Director Schwartz, Director Ward.
To be clear, we're voting on. Oh,
The
we're voting on the extension. I thought we
extension.
were voting on the call to the question. No, I vote no.
Okay, 3 noes and no abstention, and the motion is carried. Director Voigt, final call. Okay, we leave him. Okay, Director Voigt, no vote on this. Very good. All right, the motion is carried.